This is George Newbern, the voice of Superman, and you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Get charged up for action that'll shock your system.
Tell me that's not cool.
An unstoppable superhero and his crew embark on impossible missions and will bring mutated villains to justice.
When Static's in the house, bad guys better step off.
Pull the plug on crime with the adventures of Static Shock. Yeah!
Welcome, everybody, to episode 208 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, and with me, my good friend, good brother, the man that runs our Twitter page. That's right, it's Liam. Liam, welcome to episode 208 of the DCAU Review. We are in a new month here of May, which means we are selecting another different series to cover after an exciting month last month with the Justice League. We are moving back to those sunny skies of Dakota for another Static Shock month.
That is right, Cal. We're as with a lot of our non-Batman shows, we kind of jump around with Static Shock, and this week we find ourselves back in the very early episodes of this series, back in season 1, with an interesting episode. And despite what the title might tell you, it's not a killer doll on loose, but yes, this episode is in fact called Child's Play.
Honestly, with a title like that and as many like homages and fun little itty bits that they had in there, they could have thrown in a killer doll and it would have made a little more sense. But before we get into talking about the fun that we had on this week's episode, I assume we can get into the plot for this week's episode and the official IMDb plot synopsis, brought to you by The Pod Tower. Head over to the youtube.com/The Pod Tower and subscribe. Not only do you get our full catalog, our back catalog, including all of the archives and bonus episodes, but in addition to that, you get content from our friends over at the Watchtower database and Tim Talk. Liam, this episode, Child's Play, originally aired on the Kids WB here in the US back on December the 3rd, 2000, meaning we are coming up here in a few months on the 22-year anniversary of this episode's debut.
That is right. So as mentioned, this is the synopsis for Child's Play, which is written by Stan Berkowitz, directed by James Tucker, with music by Derek Thornton and animation by the duo of Top Draw Animation and the wonderfully named Slightly Offbeat Productions. And that synopsis reads as such. 8-year-old Dwayne McCall, who has the power to make anything his young mind can imagine, is being manipulated by his evil older brother, Aaron. Aaron wants to use Dwayne's powers for his own gain.
I think you probably could have just said manipulated by his evil older brother and not thrown in that last sentence there. It's just needless information that elongated the description. Still to see, I guess. See,
yeah, I would say that would be implied. That sentence would be implied by the evil brother manipulating the child.
Also, wrong information, right? Stepbrother, very clearly, yes. Stepbrother.
That's a big plot point of this episode, as we'll get to. But yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So we open up the episode here, and we are at Virgil's dad's community center, I believe, is where we take place first. And we open up on this scene, and there is what appears to be a man of the cloth, a priest of some kind, outside talking about impending judgment and the end being nigh. It's very non-denominational. I will say that there is the name God is never used. The only thing signifying, it's very obvious that he's a priest. He's wearing a priest's collar, and he sort of has the a priest robe on. In addition to shouting, the end is near, and that all accounts will be settled. But he doesn't ever invoke the name of God, and I have to assume that had something to do with the standards and practices of not involving direct religions into the children's cartoon. But it's heavily implied that this man is preaching fire and brimstone here at the beginning and demanding that everybody turn from their ways. There is a fountain that is sitting outside of this community center that appears to change its form, and this man purports it to be a sign that he is doing a good job standing out there. And as Virgil is inside with his dad, attempting to get some money out of him, they notice the commotion that's happening outside. Virgil's dad goes to investigate and definitely tries to call out the gentleman and ask him why he's done this damage to his fountain. And the priest, of course, maintains that he did nothing, that this was a sign, an act from someone up above. And it appears, I guess the intimation is that people are thinking that it's turned from water into wine, or perhaps water into blood. But as Static goes to investigate, he learns that in fact it is not blood, but cherry soda.
What did you do to my fountain?
It wasn't my hand that did this, brother. It was no human hand at all.
Don't give me that.
You can't deny it. This is a sign from above. A sign of...
Cherry soda.
Say what?
This red stuff. It's cherry soda.
Man, what you got against me?
Who spiked the fountain?
Beats me. It was working fine an hour ago.
And this leaves everybody there sort of stroking their chins and scratching their heads, wondering what on earth is going on. And from there, we transition back to school, where Richie and Virgil are walking down the hall, recounting what's happening with Daisy. Daisy mentions that there was another strange incident that occurred in another part of town where there was snow that came from the ground, or it came from the sky rather, and but it didn't actually turn out to be snow. It turned out to be vanilla ice cream. So there's all these happenings that are going on, and it's at this moment that Virgil looks up and happens to see a returning person to the school, someone that we've not yet met before, but someone purported by the name of Aaron, who is just returning from boarding school or correction school. I forget how they put it, but
reform school.
Reform school. I knew it was some sort of cliched like kids nod to, like, they didn't say it wasn't juvenile hall or like something. It's just reform school, whatever that means. So they sent him to reform school. He's back from there. Virgil goes up to say hello, and let's just say Aaron isn't really interested in having much of a conversation with him, and gives him a bit of the cold shoulder despite Virgil's best efforts to welcome him back to the school.
Aaron. Maybe we should say hello to him.
You could say hello.
Who is this guy?
Aaron Price. He's been away for a while.
Hey, Aaron, remember me? Virgil Hawkins. Just want to say welcome back and... Why, thank you, Virgil. It's nice to be back.
So where has he been?
Reform school.
Hope he bought a round-trip ticket.
Yeah, so we kind of set up from there, and from there we go back to the community center where we see some kids playing basketball and sort of arguing, just like any like Twitter comment section under an NBA highlight. People are arguing about players from different eras and who could beat who, and this kid Dwayne, who we meet, who we also saw in that opening scene when the fountain got transformed, starts talking about a comic book character that he loves and how he would be the best basketball player. It's and of course the kids are sort of quick to make fun of him, and as a result, that very character, they don't call him Dinobot because I think that's trademarked by
this is
by
Dreadbot 3000.
Dreadbot, that's right. But yes, a big sort of Transformers style robot bursts through the wall and starts wreaking havoc on the basketball court, and Virgil and Richie had just arrived, so of course Static springs into action and quickly is sort of figuring out that his powers don't seem to be affecting the robot, and meanwhile we do find out that in fact this kid Dwayne has a stepbrother, as mentioned in our synopsis, who is in fact that same troubled kid from Virgil's school, Aaron, and Dwayne really wants to spend time with Aaron, and Aaron's not interested. He's interested in watching Static fight this giant robot. So suddenly the giant robot disappears, in fact transforms back a little dog, and that leaves Static confused, as well as sort of leaving Aaron a little bit suspicious. And we set up pretty quickly that Aaron doesn't seem all that interested in being a part of Dwayne's life, but is sort of being forced to, and it causes some concern as they begin to leave together, and Virgil's father sort of accosts them, and we figure out very quickly that this is maybe not a great home situation for Dwayne, but not really much Virgil's father can do in that moment, since he is technically allowed to take Dwayne with him, and they go on their merry way as Aaron goes on to meet with a friend, and is sort of just constantly clearly doesn't want anything to do with Dwayne, until once again he sees Dwayne has somehow gotten himself a chili dog, and he doesn't understand where, because there's no restaurants around. He didn't dig it out of the trash, and Aaron sort of at that point puts two and two together that Dwayne was in fact affected by the Big Bang.
That Big Bang must have been some party. Too bad I missed it.
Oh yeah, it was weird. There's this huge purple cloud, kind of glittery, and it came from out of nowhere.
How do you know so much about it?
I don't know. Hey, want to get some food? You like hot dogs, don't you?
Not hungry. And your mother's the one who feeds you, not me. Yo, Ray! Aaron, my man! Where you been? Long story. Stay. We'll talk later, when the kid's not around.
Who is he anyway? Your brother?
Step brother. Hey, where'd you get that?
I was hungry.
I asked where you got it. No food places around here. You didn't take it out of the trash. You made that. You were in the Big Bang, weren't you? And now if you want something bad enough, it just happens. Like that hot dog, or the monster back at the community center.
Aaron, please don't say anything. Please. I don't want to get in trouble.
And that he has pretty much a magic power. Like, it's like Hot Streak can shoot fire. And then there's a guy who turns into like a purple Hulk, or there's like Rubber Band Man. And then there's this kid who can do anything. Well, he can turn anything into anything else. He can literally transform matter into other forms of matter. Like this person is immensely powerful.
Yeah, it is. He and the crazy thing, of course, and the thing that's interesting in the plot itself is that he's an 8-year-old boy, so he has the imagination and the ability to create whatever he wants to, but very, very largely stays in this world of fantasy, as we learn. Static and Richie, who believe that maybe Dwayne has something to do with this, decide to go and investigate by going to Dwayne's house and speaking with his mother. So they talk to her, and I don't know why this woman believes that these two 14-year-old boys are representatives for anything, let alone this after school program or whatever. But they convince her that they should get information from her more information about Dwayne. So she divulges the information that he was around during the time of the Big Bang, and he had gone outside in an attempt to rescue their dog, and she doesn't believe that he was actually affected by it, but she did mention that since she had married Aaron's father, that Dwayne had largely retreated into video games and comic books, which that allows Static and Richie to sort of look at each other and recognize that some of these things appearing out of nowhere, including the Dreadbot 3000, who Static was familiar with from the video game, looked very familiar from him. So it's at this point that we flash back, and Aaron is basically at this point fully and completely trying to manipulate Dwayne as best as he can. But because Dwayne is an innocent child, he does have a good heart about him and isn't just ready to straight up do evil things. So they're at this construction site, and Dwayne is trying to convince him to turn this nail into a car key so they can steal an expensive looking car. And Dwayne has his reservations about that. This is just after him turning a popsicle stick into $100 bill, but he's never seen $100 bill, so he turns it into like a play money $100 bill, and Aaron's mad at him and yelling at him. So Dwayne has this conscience about him, which I thought is endearing because he does have this child's innocence about him and believes, hey, well, I shouldn't just use my powers for evil and steal cars. That's not right. So Aaron takes him to points over to the bank and recognizes an opportunity there as he tells Dwayne that these people took advantage of him and did him wrong, and that it's their opportunity now to get even at that point. So he sort of manipulates him in that way. So that leads us to our next moment as they stand across from the bank, and Dwayne sends in Sumo Kiri, who I believe is a cartoon that we learn once he begins his fight with Static. A very funny looking Asian stereotype, I guess, is how it could be portrayed. Unfortunately, this show, we've talked about it in prior episodes as well, but doesn't do a lot for reinforcing, or does a lot to reinforce Asian stereotypes, and at times it's uncomfortable. But this cartoon character, Sumo Kiri, who just screams nonsense and is destroying the bank, takes this opportunity and to break into it. Dwayne is having the character try to break into the safe despite his protests. Aaron says not only have they ripped him off, but lots of other people as well, trying to encourage him that this is in fact right.
Sumo Kiri? Yeah, and without the commercials.
Come on, Dwayne, make him open it. Don't disappoint me.
He'll get it done, bro.
Why'd I think electricity would affect you? You're imaginary. But that vault's real. This ought to hold you. Nice shot.
Static does show up at this point, and we get our first little skirmish here between Static. Well, I guess it's the follow-up battle to Static versus Dreadbot. It's Static versus Sumo Kiri, and it's actually a fun little fight that they have.
It is. So, like, as I think we mentioned, so Static's electricity does not affect these things, and but like other things do. Like he can drop things on it. He can drop other like solid objects or tie it up using a metal bar, like a steel girder, or things like that. So he can kind of use his powers. He has to be a little bit more creative. He can't just zap the thing. Which, I mean, why that is, I'm not exactly sure, but that's the rule. They set up the rule, and then they follow that rule. So I'll let it go. But yes, he and Sumo Kiri have a pretty lengthy confrontation in this safe, and he's really not doing so well. He looks like maybe he has it in hand for a second, but finally. The Sumo is able to throw something which opens up a water pipe behind him, which drenches Static and sort of shorts out his powers. And unfortunately, the cops arrive right at that moment, and so Dwayne and Aaron retreat at that point. And that sort of sets up our final battle there as Virgil and Richie have an idea of how they're going to how to solve things. Virgil sort of goes up to Dwayne at the community center and tells him, that he thinks Aaron is a bad influence on him, that he's trying to get him to do bad things and hurt people. And Dwayne really won't hear it. But and as Virgil's sort of pondering how he could possibly get through to to Dwayne rather, he notices that Richie has a Walkman. Because this was made in the year 2000, which honestly it should have been a CD player, but I guess because they needed something to record on, it had to be a tape player still.
Yep.
I think tape players were even a little bit outdated by this point, but they hatch a plan. So we cut back to the high school where Virgil goes up to Aaron and invites him to this party and is kind of winding him up, telling him that Frida wants to meet Aaron and wants to hang out with them, but Virgil sort of mentioned that he shouldn't bring Dwayne, his little brother, and he asks Aaron if that's going to be a problem because of how tight they are. But Aaron blows that off and tells Virgil that they're not even really related. They're not close, and they're not even really brothers. And as they're walking away, we see that Richie very nondescriptly in a trench coat for some.
Hey, Aaron. Guess we kind of got off on the wrong foot the other day. Exactly. So I'm having this party on Saturday night. Want you to be there.
Who else is coming?
Just some friends. Richie, Daisy, Frida, Felix.
Frida? She's gonna be there?
Oh, yeah. And she's really looking forward to seeing you. Just one thing, though. Your brother Dwayne's too young for this bash.
No problem. I'll be there by myself.
You sure? I know you're tight, you and your bro. And
we're not tight. And he's not my brother. He's just a stepbrother.
Okay. I believe you. Did you get it?
Oh, yeah. Thanks to the shock box.
I'm really gonna hate doing this to that little kid. But he's gotta know the truth. Aaron's just taking advantage of it.
He brought the duster. To school that day.
I was like, when I saw Richie walk out in a trench coat, I was like, yes. He should have had like a fedora and been holding up a newspaper or something too.
Agreed.
It's just like, what for? Like, oh, I'm trying to be nondescript. I'll wear a trench coat. Oh, it's beautiful. But yes, we find out that with the aid of this tape recorder and of course the trusty shock vox, Richie is able to record Aaron saying all that nasty stuff about Dwayne, and before they can really deal with it, they go back to the community center where once again Virgil's father is really concerned about Dwayne and informs the teenagers that Dwayne was once again taken out by Aaron, that they were going to the mall together, and that sort of sets up our final fight as it's Static versus quite a few colorful characters as he tries to not only fight those crazy monsters, but also has to try to get through to Dwayne once and for all.
That's right. And they show up to the mall just in time to have a battle with Loco Martian, who apparently was a character from a comic book. And there's a very meta conversation with nobody in particular, Static's classic narration where he's talking about comic books, and it's so meta. He might as well look at the camera and wink and talk directly to the viewer.
Loco Martian? I love that guy. But I didn't think anybody read comics anymore. No effect. Big surprise. Wait a minute. In the comics, only one thing could hurt you. Fire. Whoever said comics don't teach you anything?
And then after discovering and realizing that, wouldn't you know it, this Loco Martian's vulnerability is fire, just as it was in the comics. Hey, who says that comic books won't teach you anything? So yeah, we have a nice little meta dialogue there from Static, but Static still tries to appeal to Dwayne, who, as you mentioned, refused to listen to anything. He's so desperate to have this connection with Aaron, he refuses to believe that Aaron's interest is only in his power set and not in him. And so as Static continues to try to appeal to that, there are additional characters that Static has to fight, including Plant Man and another potential Asian stereotype that is used that Static has to fight, until Static realizes that hey, if I continue this, it's not going to do any good. So he has an idea to hook up the tape recorder to the PA system in the mall, and he plays the recording that he has of Aaron talking about how Dwayne, he's not that tight with Dwayne, and that Dwayne is his stepbrother, not his real brother. And it's at this point that Dwayne has had enough and decides to relent. Despite Aaron's demand that he finish Static off, he relents, and the items that were attacking Static, including this dinosaur robot thing that was attacking him at the very end, revert back to their original form of just normal matter. And it's at this point that Static recognizes and realizes that it's time to swoop in. He does have this brief little pep talk with Dwayne. Dwayne admits that he's not sure what's right or wrong at this time, that he's very confused. Static reassures him that he has plenty of time to figure that out and how to use his powers. Aaron comes up, and Static decides it's best that he spend his time away from Dwayne in the future, and that he's expecting him to admit to the police that he's the one that was behind everything, as he sort of pins him to the wall with his static cling. And that's kind of where we wrap things up.
Yeah, we have a nice little epilogue as Static is sort of leaving the scene. He sees Richie down below, who asks where he's going, and Virgil says he's going back to the community center to let his father know that he did in fact, or he was in fact a good influence on Dwayne after all. So yeah, it's a nice little bow to point off to it as
Sure.
Static literally flies off into the sunset. But yeah, so like I think this episode is really fun.
Yeah,
as far as Static fighting weird giant cartoon characters. We'll certainly talk about more of that in visuals. As like what's our, because we talk about a lot of these season 1 episodes especially have that like edutainment feel to them. I don't really know what the message of this one is. Like, don't steal or don't give into peer pressure, I guess, even from like family members. Like I
feel like
really
maybe this one
we were telling
maybe
people.
This one didn't have the edutainment thing to it. It was just kind of a story. Like, I don't think too many 8-year-olds are going to identify with being able to turn any matter into a living, breathing cartoon. So I think more or less the only learned thing here, you have the moral at the end, like you said, where Static was talking about the good that his father is doing and allowing his dad to sort of see that the good that he's doing in the community center is having a positive impact. And the fact that his dad clearly showed care for Dwayne throughout, because he was sort of worried about Aaron all along and his influence over Dwayne. So maybe there was some of that seeing the fruits of your labor, so to speak, pan out in a good way. But yeah, I don't think from the Aaron and Dwayne side of things, it didn't feel like there was much of a lesson to be learned, unless it's just like a very deep buried, watch out who your friends are, or don't be so consumed with being popular or being liked that you do dumb things. I don't know, but it's not overt. I agree with you.
Yeah, so I mean, that being said, I think it's fine. I think looking at that, especially where our episode ends with Virgil, talking about going off to, give his father a pat on the back. Maybe you could have had, I mean, we do cut back to Virgil's dad a few times throughout the episode where he's, showing concern for Dwayne and everything. But it does feel like maybe if we hit that a little harder, or if the episode is a little more focused on Mr. Hawkins and him, maybe being like frustrated or feeling like he's not able to get through to, or he doesn't relate to kids anymore. And then in the end, it's his teaching that really saves Dwayne and saves Static ultimately. Because yes, the giant dinosaur pretty much has Static dead to rights. And when Dwayne sort of decides to turn it back into the little toy. So maybe we could tweak some things here, but again, overall it's silly, but it creates some fun action beats, and it's a simple little story. I ended up settling on 5 out of 10 for my plot.
Nice. I went a little bit higher. I actually really enjoyed this episode, and I will say that my thought in mind with this was that I was grading on a curve, especially because we're in season 1 Static. We've had a lot of episodes that we didn't necessarily care for, a couple that we did, but a lot, and I didn't want to be overly critical for an episode. I think it is a lot of fun. I think that maybe not having a moral of the story certainly could hurt this, but I think as far as a cartoon story with Static involved goes, this was kind of fun. And I don't remember seeing this in the original run. It's very possible that I did, but I didn't remember it too much, so I kind of went in fresh. And I gotta admit, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for what it was. So I ended up giving Plot a 7 out of 10 for my score.
Nice.
Yeah, there's I love the infusion of sort of the fantasy world too, and we'll talk about in a second here with the cartoon elements and the video game stuff. I felt like that really added to the fun spirit of this episode, and it didn't ever feel like Static was necessarily overmatched until that last scene. So the fact that the little boy, this innocent child ended up having the change of heart at the last bit, it kind of just felt like, I don't know, a random kids movie from the 80s or 90s to me in some way. Like, Static wasn't necessarily the focus of the episode. He was in a way, but it was more of a Dwayne centered story, and with Static kind of being there and showing up and kind of helping him at the end. So yeah, I did enjoy it, and maybe grading on a curve set my points a little bit higher there, but 7 out of 10 for me for this week.
Nice.
All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be animation and visuals. And I know there are a pair of studios that we mentioned this week, as oftentimes has been the case as we've reviewed some of these early episodes of Static. What did you like from the visuals for this week?
So I think the thing that stands out, Asian stereotypes notwithstanding, is the designs of all the different monsters and robots and stuff. You have the robot that shows up on the basketball court. I think that's design that's again sort of reminiscent of like a Transformer. You have the giant sumo wrestler. That's pretty fun. And then you have in that final bit in the mall, you have a few things. I love the snake train.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's really wacky and fun. I like the design of that as well, with the weird antenna on it, and it's like stealing clothes and putting it in its back and then zipping off. I think that's fun. And then I really dig Plant Guy, who just looks like
Plant Man. It's Plant Man.
My apologies to the Plant Man community, but yes, he's a big ball of fun. He looks like one of those like a Doom monster, but made out of broccoli or something. So I thought
he gave me vibes of the Raisin Bran mascot, the son from the Raisin Bran. If you're familiar with the American cereal Raisin Bran mascot, Kellogg's Raisin Bran. Yeah, he was definitely an interesting design. And I will say I did not catch the name of the character that came alongside him, but she did have the classic like forearm look, which I think is sort of like one of those characters from Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter. I don't know, one of those fighting games from the 90s. So there was probably some homage to that in that, because she was clearly,
I want to say there's like an X-Men villain who's like a ninja lady with forearms too.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that could be it too. Could have been an homage to that. No, but I agree with you, those are a ton of fun. And I feel like especially the scene, if you didn't have him screaming what closed captioning says is just screaming in foreign language, the sumo character I thought was hilarious. I just like the way that he moved very much like a cartoon character. He's very buoyant, lots of bouncing going on, and he kind of changes sizes midway through the fight, and he gets stuck in the hole that Static digs into the floor, and then he's sort of peering down into the hole. He's stuck upside down in it trying to get Static. But I felt like, this is a show that didn't have we haven't given great marks for the animation for that, especially for the first season. Maybe the Rubber Band Man episodes have been the higher ones that we graded for these early episodes. But I felt like because these characters were not based in reality, that they could have a little bit more freedom and fun to do more with them. And they definitely had fun with the actual character designs themselves. Those were tons of fun, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably the most the most fun of the episode. As far as I don't know, I don't know if this is just I have to readjust to season 1 static, but I thought even per season one static standpoints, like everybody's got these real big like doe eyes, and everybody has really long skinny necks. Like those were there's some, and I looked it up. These two studios did team up on I think 4 other episodes, a couple of which we've covered throughout seasons 1 and 2. But yeah, I don't know if it was just me having to readjust, but they did seem very, and again, this especially the slightly offbeat productions studio is a New Zealand based studio that's worked on like a lot of Disney and some PBS cartoons and stuff in the 90s and 2000s. And I feel like, yeah, that definitely had a feel to it. And then the action itself, I almost felt like Super Friends, in that because Static couldn't zap anybody or like directly fight them, he had to like zap a decoration from the ceiling, which would fall and tie up the Kung Pao, and then he's using the steel girder to stop the sumo wrestler. It just felt very, very old school superhero cartoons where there's like no direct physical violence allowed at all.
Yeah, that was, I mean, yeah, there was no punching, there was no kicking, and yeah, it allowed for it. It felt very much like a Spider-Man the animated series cartoon. You know, no physical violence allowed, so you have to figure out some way to contain these people. Which he does zap the sign in the mall that drops down on her, and it kind of traps her underneath of like one of the letters off of the signs. Or as you mentioned in the scene with the sumo, he ties him up with a steel girder at one point. So yeah, there was some different combat than perhaps we've been used to, but I feel like maybe that we just haven't watched these episodes in a while, so that's probably getting used to that. So I will say one of the things that I noticed, which this is not just a Static problem, but this is any time that I think I've ever seen this in any cartoon anywhere. I don't know what it is, and maybe things are different now, and maybe Space Jam was okay with doing it, but I don't think there's ever been a successful animation of basketball in a cartoon. And the opening scene where the kids are playing basketball, it just looks like the people, and it's perhaps the people who are in charge of animating it are not familiar with the game of basketball or how to animate somebody dribbling a basketball. But I cannot remember a time where I've seen a cartoon dribble a basketball and it looks like an actual human being dribbling a basketball. You know what I mean? Like, yes. This wasn't supposed to be a cartoon character bouncing a basketball. It was supposed to be live, it's supposed to be real human beings bouncing basketballs. I just made a note of that. I was like, these people have never seen the sport of basketball, or were so limited in the way their resources to be able to animate this. They should have just done what they did later on in the episode, which there's like a profile shot of Dwayne just shooting jump shots. I was like, they should have just done that and not tried to animate a full scene where they were actually playing basketball, because this looks so bad.
Yeah, it's pretty I hadn't really thought about that, but yes, we've seen basketball in a few different cartoons, and it always looks a little janky rough and weird. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but with that said, I think that for the most part, again, grading on a curve looking at this, I felt like most people moved okay in most of the scenes. That granted, there wasn't a whole lot of walking or those scenes before that we've been like, things kind of look a little off here by the way that these characters are moving. I will say that one of the things I did notice was Aaron has this piece of hair that hangs down in his face. And I will credit, I wouldn't have drawn that because that single strand of hair, we've talked about that before, how that was the same thing in Joker's Favor with Charlie's single thick string of hair across his forehead. Mm-hmm. Like there's just something about it that it doesn't look like hair because they're not gonna animate individual strands. So it's just this big clump of something. It looks like Play-Doh or something that's just hanging off of their head. But I will say when he moves, it swings back and forth very fluidly. So they did a good job of animating the hair. Anyway, with all that said, grading on a curve for this week, and just the enjoyment that I got out of the designs for all of the various fantasy creatures that were created, I ended up giving animation and visuals a pretty strong 7 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I'm just 1 point lower there. I went 6 out of 10. I think it's I think the strength of it is certainly in the fight scenes with the crazy creatures and mascots and things like that. I think that's a lot of fun, and I think it lends itself to the fact that it doesn't have to, even within the context of this fictional cartoon world, it doesn't have to look real in any way. So I think they definitely got to have some fun there and really stretch their legs and come up with some really out there designs. So yeah, that's definitely a lot of fun.
All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, and that is going to be our music for this week. So I will say, this week's music did not offend me in any way. And in fact, I found myself enjoying it in a few places. Not coincidentally, not a lot of lyrics are found in this week's music. For me, I think the standouts were likely, and I'm interested to hear if you had anything that stood out as well. The things that stood out for me were likely the 2 fight scenes, the sumo scene that we mentioned already, and really that end scene with the mall. And leading up to that one's it seems to be a little bit of a longer conflict. And because of that, they actually started playing what sounded like more 8-bit inspired, or a very, it would have not been out of place for a Super Nintendo video game for that era, whatever bit that was. It's just very electronic, very 80s, very synthesizer, and comes through as Static is sort of battling these characters from comic books and from video games. So the 3 battles that he has with these creatures, I felt like those were the standouts for the music for me, with the emphasis being really on that final battle. I really enjoyed the music because it changes sort of mid-fight, and even as he goes to as he realizes that he has to hook up the audio device to the PA, it sort of crescendos at that point, and then it drops out completely as he plays back the recording of Aaron. But I thought that it was unique. I thought it was another thing that they had fun with. You have these characters that are based on, that were supposedly based on video game characters or cartoons, so you make the music fit those scenes to fit those specific characters, which I feel like is the hallmark of some of the best DCAU soundtracks that we like to talk about. So I really, really enjoyed the music this week for those. I ended up giving music a pretty strong 8 out of 10. What about you?
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I went 7 out of 10 for pretty much the exact same reasons that you gave it. I thought the sort of video game style music was really a nice change of pace here. A lot of times the static action sequences, especially I think in these early seasons, just rely pretty heavily on the main static theme, which we still get a little bit of that worked in. But yeah, going with sort of each boss fight, as it were, with having its own a bit more of a unique sound to each fight scene, I think really helps differentiate that and definitely helps it stand out. So I went with a pretty similar score there.
Love it. All right, Liam, let's wrap things up this week with our final category, and that is going to be our voice acting. Not a huge cast this week because we didn't have a ton of characters, and we had a bunch of characters, fantasy characters that didn't do a lot of talking. So let's talk about this week's voice cast.
That's right. We do briefly have Crystal Scales returning as Daisy. as well as we have of course Kevin Michael Richardson as Mr. Hawkins, Jason Marsden as Richie, and then for our guest cast here, we do have Lorraine Newman as Dwayne's mom, who folks would actually know. Speaking of DCAU, she voices Baby Doll in the new Batman Adventures appearance. Different voice actress, I think, than the original, but they do have her there. And then we have I will just mention the preacher who you mentioned at the start of the episode is played by a man named Garrett Morris, who is one of those, if you Google that name and see that picture, you will know who that is. So I encourage everyone to do that. So I wanted to mention him. He's been on some sitcoms like the Two Broke Girls show, one of those shows that was on for like 7 years and yet will leave no lasting cultural impact.
No one that was a fan of it or watched it. Yep.
Nope, but it lasted for years and years. Might still be on. I don't know. But anyway, he's been in a lot of stuff. So it's one of those names. I think I want to say he'd been in some Adam Sandler movies too. But definitely one of those names. It's fun to have him kind of show up, and the character design for him kind of looks like the actor as well. So that was kind of a nice touch there. And then yes, our villains or would-be villains of the piece, we have Blaine Barbosa, what a fantastic name, playing Dwayne. I think as far as kid actors go, his character's playing this kind of really sheepish, nerdy kid who's really unsure of himself. I think he does a good job there, and maybe it's a little flat in some parts, but for per kid actor standards, I think he does a pretty solid job.
Yeah, I thought he was fantastic. I don't remember very much of him, and maybe some of it was because he's playing sort of this innocent child that's teetering on trying to figure out how to please his and befriend this brother this stepbrother that he clearly looks up to and wants to have a relationship with, while also not compromising his morals. But I thought that he handled it very well, and some of that teetering back and forth where he's sort of hesitant about stealing or trying to hurt Static. There's one scene where at the end of the bank scene where Aaron mentions that the next time he's gonna, will be the time that he finishes Static off. And there's this incredulous response that Dwayne gives him, finish him off. That's wrong. And he delivers it with such innocence. And, I think it was a fantastic performance. So yeah, I thought for a child actor, we've heard and discussed many times sort of legendarily bad child acting performances when it comes to cartoons. And I think he more than surpassed those and did a pretty strong, solid job for this week's episode.
Absolutely. And then our other villain, the older stepbrother of Dwayne, we have RJ Knoll playing Aaron, and he's another veteran voice actor, done some other video games and cartoons over the years, but he's there to be, he's a pretty one-note character, I think, by design, and is playing that kind of, at first being completely disinterested and kind of annoyed that he even has to be around this kid, to when he figures out that he might become the meal ticket, then he's really, tries to be super manipulative, and he has a real sinister edge to him throughout the episode. So I think as far as that, the evil cartoon, bully bad influence on the kid, I think he does a good job there.
Yeah, he, as you mentioned, he's not asked to do very much at times. I think I do appreciate the fact that he sort of slips into like this faux caring mode when he realizes that he's going to have to do more than just try and get Dwayne to do bad things. He like sort of apologizes. He's like, oh, you're right. And then realizes he has to sort of be more manipulative. So I do appreciate that there is that subtlety that he does, where he has to come to the realization that he has to come at this at a different angle in order to get what he wants. So yeah, it's a solid job. There's not a whole lot, as you mentioned, that he has to do. Not a ton of emotion that he has to show, so hard to gauge it one way or the other, but he didn't do a bad job, I'll say that.
Yeah, I agree. And then of course We talked about him last week, and we'll talk about him again this week and several weeks after this. But of course, Phil Lamar playing Static, as you mentioned, not a big role for him this week. He's as a lot of the focus is put on Aaron and Dwayne, but always good and solid job. I think he has some nice moments there towards the end. First one as Virgil, when he's trying to convince Dwayne that his brother is a bad influence on him, and then when he's sort of appealing to him and at the end in the mall. So again, not a ton for him to do, but of course, not surprisingly, he does a solid job with what he's given.
Yeah. As you mentioned, I think the real hallmark is the very end where he gets to talk about flying back to talk to his dad. Seeing him and Kevin Michael Richardson interact, Mr. Hawk, as Mr. Hawkins is always a joy. That opening scene with the two of them, where Static's trying to get some money out of him in order to, he's trying to cajole his not only some cash out of him, but also perhaps his PIN number and his ATM card as well. I thought that was great.
Come on, Pops. Just a few bills. It's for food.
Junk food, you mean? Besides, I'm low on cash myself till I can get to an ATM.
How about I go to the ATM for you? All you gotta do is give me your card and your PIN number.
Virgil? What in the world?
And then the fact that Static sort of mentions at the end and Mr. Lamar's performance is, being proud of his dad, he's going to fly back and let him know. I thought that was great. But yeah, there's not a ton that Static had to do this week. There was that comedic part, of course, where he's convincing Dwayne's mom to let them in to talk to her about Dwayne, and he's clearly influenced by the cookie smell in the area. I thought that was kind of cute too. But yeah, not a ton for him to do, but solid. It's pretty unsurprisingly, of course.
Absolutely. Yes, for all those reasons, I ended up coming to a pretty strong 7 out of 10 for my voice acting score.
Nice. And just as it's been with almost every category this week, I just went with a point higher there, and I ended up with an 8 out of 10 for voice acting. So pretty strong scores from both of us regardless. All right, Liam. Well, that will bring us to our final scores for this week's episode, and totaling everything up, I end up with a even 30 out of 40. What about you?
Yeah, and like we said, we were only a point or two apart, I think, in every category, but across 4 categories that will add up a little bit. So I ended up with a little bit lower at 25 out of 40 for my final score.
All right. So, of course, we talk about rewatchability. I'd say even though this is a fun one, it's not really meaningful. It doesn't move the Static story along very much. It certainly doesn't play too much into the overarching storyline of the Bang Baby behind the scenes that this first season played into. So I would say that this is definitely not a must watch. If you feel like watching a fun Static episode, I think this is a fun one to enjoy, but it's definitely not a must watch for me. What about you?
No, I think if you want to be a bit pedantic, this character appears in every episode of Static Shock in the first season because he's in the title sequence. So you could claim that in order to understand the title sequence, you have to see this episode. But no, all kidding aside, no, there's not really. This character doesn't return. Seriously, Cadmus should have just snatched this kid up. Like,
seriously,
he's magic. He can do. And there don't seem to be like strong limits on it. It's not like, oh, he can only do it for a couple of minutes. He seems very in control of all of it. But yeah, it would have been fun if some of these, we've talked about that before, some of these Bang Baby characters could have made it into some of those later JLU seasons, even as cameos. But yeah, all that aside, as far as a rewatchability, yeah, I would say this one's pretty skippable. Nothing wrong with it. A fine way to spend 22 minutes if you're looking for some early in the run Static action, but not one that I'll probably come back to too often, if ever.
Agreed. All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap us up for this week. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this week's episode. Don't forget, if you are looking to support the podcast, you can do that a couple different ways. Please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, regardless of which one you listen to. We guarantee you we're likely on that one. We know a couple of those, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts, allow you to leave reviews. We'd love 5 stars. That helps us out a lot. If it's like Apple Podcasts that you listen to us on, as so many of you do, you can leave us a little blurb, also a little review to let people know what you do enjoy about us. That helps us out in the old Apple algorithm. You can also, of course, if you'd like to support us monetarily, there's a link at the bottom of each episode. You can check that out, or you can head over to DCAUreview.com and click on the shop, buy yourself a piece of merch, hat, sticker, mug, something with a logo on it, a fun, catchy logo. Of course, you can also, as we mentioned earlier on in the episode, subscribe to us on the Pod Tower on YouTube. Head over to youtube.com/thepodtower, and you can not only subscribe and get our episodes, of course, but you get that additional content from our friends. Also, if you do listen to us on there, or even if you don't listen to us on there, subscribing helps, and then liking our videos, of course, as any YouTuber would tell you, is a big part of that too. So if you don't mind liking the videos, subscribing, we won't tell you to hit that bell, but that's what they used to say when it came to YouTube stuff. Liam, we are still here. We're going to be sticking with Static for the foreseeable future here. So that means we have another Static episode next week. And get your tissues, everybody. This one's gonna be making it a little bit dusty in the room, I'm afraid.
Yeah, that's right. We thought next weekend, of course, will be Mother's Day, and we thought what better way to celebrate that than just bumming everyone out, just make everyone super sad. But yes, we'll be taking a look at, of course, the classic Static Shock episode. A lot of people remember this one, Flashback. It's a little bit later in the run, in the 3rd season. But yes, it involves time travel and lots of superhero stuff, but also a very deep and personal story of Virgil coming face to face with his deceased mother. So a lot to dig into with that one, and we look forward to tackling that one. I haven't seen that one in a very, very long time, so looking forward to approaching it with fresh eyes next week.
Absolutely. And we invite you back to join us next week, but until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.